The night I accidentally saw my stepson in that moment, everything I believed about right and wrong began to blur. I didn't fall for him with a kiss. I fell the moment he looked at me like I mattered. Before we begin, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video if you enjoy heartfelt stories like this one. I married Adrian because he made me feel secure. He was steady, accomplished, and dependable. Everything I believed I needed after years of exhausting, unstable relationships. For a while that stability brought comfort. But slowly it became something else entirely. What once felt calming turned into a void. Our conversations became minimal, mostly about chores or bills. Physical closeness faded. Affection turned mechanical and eventually vanished. I kept telling myself it was just a phase. That it was normal. People age. Life gets busy. But deep down I knew I was craving something more. Connection, tenderness, the feeling of being truly noticed. I would see couples holding hands at the park or laughing together in cafes and feel a quiet ache. I had the life others dreamed of. A reliable partner, a peaceful home, but I felt invisible in it. Like I was slowly fading. When Ethan, my stepson, came to live with us after a breakup, I prepared myself for discomfort. But he was calm, respectful. He pitched in around the house, asked how I was doing, and when I answered, he genuinely listened. Something Adrian hadn't done in a long time. It all felt innocent. When I mentioned feeling drained, he'd recommend a movie to relax. If I said dinner felt too quiet, he'd sit with me to keep me company. I began to look forward to those small moments. Not out of romance, at least not at first, but from a simple human need. He paid attention. Noticed when I wore a new color or changed my hair. He gave compliments that felt genuine, with no agenda. Adrian hadn't looked at me that way in years. One night we were sitting at the table finishing leftovers, just chatting. I laughed at something he said. A real, unguarded laugh I hadn't felt in months. He smiled and said, "You should do that more often. It looks good on you." Something shifted. It wasn't romantic or inappropriate. It was just recognition. I felt present, alive. Then came the night that changed everything. Adrian was away for a work trip. I was walking down the hall for a glass of water when I passed Ethan's room and heard something. A soft sound, then a voice. The door was slightly open. I glanced in, curious. I didn't intend to intrude. But I froze. He was lying on the bed, shirtless, with his phone in hand. A woman's voice came through the speaker. Breathy, unmistakably intimate. I should have looked away immediately. But I didn't. I stood there, stunned, for a second too long. And then shame hit me, heavy and fast, tangled with something deeper I didn't want to name. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, shaken. It wasn't just the scene that unsettled me, it was how I felt. Something deep and confusing had been stirred, and I couldn't unfeel it. The next day I avoided him. But the memory lingered, and worse, so did the feeling. I became aware of him in new ways. The way his voice sounded late at night. His scent after a shower. The way his eyes met mine and actually stayed there. I started dressing a little nicer around the house. Maybe some mascara, a bit of lipstick. I told myself it was for me, but I knew better. It was the attention I missed. His attention. We never spoke about that night. But something between us changed. The silence started to hum with unspoken things. It was a tension that grew slowly, day by day, like a thread pulled tight. Then it snapped. Adrian and I had another cold argument, full of nothing and everything. He left again, another trip, another escape. That night, I sat on the couch with a glass of wine, my eyes swollen from tears. Ethan came home late, saw me there, and sat beside me. He didn't ask anything. He just sat. After a long, quiet moment, he said softly, "You saw me that night, didn't you?" I didn't respond. But I didn't deny it either. He didn't act embarrassed. He wasn't smug. Just quiet. Understanding. "You haven't looked at me the same since," he added. I wanted to change the subject, pretend none of it had happened. But then he reached out and touched my hand. And in that single touch, I felt more comfort than I had in years. I whispered that this was wrong. He nodded. But neither of us pulled away. I said it couldn't happen. And he asked, "Then why are we still sitting here?" Had no answer. What followed wasn't premeditated. It wasn't planned. It wasn't about seduction. It was about release. Years of silence, of feeling invisible, came rushing to the surface. The moment swallowed us both. Afterward, I didn't feel proud. I didn't even feel ashamed. Just stillness. Ethan looked uncertain. I couldn't meet his gaze. I stood, said I needed air, and stepped outside. That night, when I saw myself in the mirror, I felt like a stranger. Not because of guilt, but because I didn't feel any. Not yet. What I felt was something raw and honest, like I'd finally taken a breath after being underwater for years. The next morning, everything felt oddly normal. I made coffee. Got alone. Ethan entered the kitchen, and our eyes met briefly. We didn't talk about it. In fact, we hardly spoke at all after that. Days went by. Then weeks. He started spending more time out, eventually mentioning he'd move back in with his mother. I didn't argue. I just nodded. When he left, he paused at the door and said, "Take care of yourself." And then he was gone. Now I go through the motions. I smile when I'm supposed to. Keep playing the part. But inside I'm slowly unraveling. I keep asking myself, was it just loneliness? Or did I trade years of silence for a single moment of honesty? I broke something. Marriage. Role. Maybe even a part of myself. And I still don't know if I'd undo it. The days after Ethan left felt unnaturally quiet. The house, once filled with small sounds. His footsteps upstairs, his music echoing softly down the hall, now seemed hollow. Even Adrian noticed the shift. He asked if I missed Ethan, and I said, "Of course," keeping my voice steady. He didn't press. He never did. Adrian went back to his routines. Work, calls, silence over dinner. Our lives moved parallel again, never touching. And I just existed, caught somewhere between guilt and something far more complicated. I thought time would blur the memory. That eventually, I'd convince myself it was just a mistake. Something fragile and fleeting, like a dream you forget by morning. But it didn't fade. Stayed with me not just as an image but as a feeling. A moment that reminded me I was still alive. Sometimes I'd find myself standing by the kitchen sink, staring out the window, remembering Ethan's voice, the way he had looked at me, like I mattered. Like he saw everything I kept buried. Not out of need or desire but understanding. That kind of gaze can haunt you. Adrian and I grew more distant, though we never spoke of it. That's the thing about emotional neglect. It doesn't scream. It whispers. And after a while you stop hearing it altogether. I wondered often if Ethan thought of me too. Whether he carried the same confusion I did. If he hated me. Or missed me. Or if he'd convinced himself that night never happened. Then, one afternoon I got a message. It was from an unknown number, but I recognized the tone instantly. Just wanted to check in. Hope you're okay. No name. No signature. But I knew. My heart thudded against my chest. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours before replying. "I'm here." "I'm okay. You?" He responded, still figuring things out. That was it. No more. But it was enough to stir everything back to the surface. I didn't tell Adrian. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I didn't know what it was. A goodbye. A beginning. I wasn't sure. I started journaling. Pages of unspoken words, things I wished I could say aloud. I wrote about how invisible I had felt for years. How Ethan had seen through the wall I didn't even realize I'd built. I wrote about that night. Not to justify it but to understand it. We weren't in love. That wasn't the right word. Love was something soft, blooming over time. What happened between us wasn't gentle. It was like being pulled from a deep sleep. Sudden, shocking, and irreversible. It didn't last long, but it shook something loose in both of us. Weeks passed, and Ethan didn't message again. I didn't expect him to. Maybe that single exchange was all we both needed. To know the other still existed, still carried a piece of it. Eventually, Adrian and I went to couples therapy. It was his idea, surprisingly. I think even he had begun to notice the distance. During those sessions, I said things I'd been afraid to admit. That I felt alone even when he was right next to me. That I couldn't remember the last time he truly looked at me. Not just saw me, but looked. He didn't get angry. Just nodded. He said he didn't know how things got this way. He thought everything was fine. And that was the most painful part. We kept trying for a few more months. Therapy. Date nights. Meaningless gestures to resuscitate something already gone cold. But nothing changed. Not really. Eventually I moved out. It wasn't a dramatic breakup. No yelling. No slam doors. Just a quiet agreement that we were better apart. That we had become two people who were more lonely together than alone. I didn't reach out to Ethan. And he didn't reach out to me. That part of my life was like a chapter one wasn't sure belonged to the same book. But it was written whether I liked it or not. Sometimes I still think about him. Not in the way people romanticize past lovers, but in a quieter way. A moment, a look, a feeling, something that reminded me I was once seen. I don't regret the night. And maybe that's the hardest truth to live with. 'Cause it was wrong. By every standard, every line society draws. But it woke something in me I had let die. A need to feel, to be touched, to matter. Now I live in a small apartment. It's quiet, but in a peaceful way. Paint again. I joined a book club. I cook for myself and sometimes even dance in the kitchen when no one's watching. I don't pretend to have it all figured out. Some nights I still cry. Some mornings I still feel hollow. But I'm trying. Trying to live honestly. Trying to forgive myself. Trying to believe that moments, even the messy, broken ones, can still be a kind of salvation. And in the stillness of this new life, I've learned something important. Sometimes it's not about choosing the right thing. It's about choosing the real thing. And living with whatever comes after.